So many blue books.
The blue books?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on page 57. We had a lot of interesting questions that arose on this passage. Yesterday I wanted to get across the key interpersonal point of doing something for somebody without creating a debt of gratitude. But let's go back through because a lot of people raised good questions, and we'll see if we can get clarity on the details of this passage and the other passage that we studied yesterday. So starting with verse 10. There was a famine in the land, and Abram descended to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. Now, the land is the land of Canaan, or what we call the land of Israel. He had been told to go there by God, and he went. Then there was a famine, and he went down to Egypt because of the famine. So people asked, why Egypt? Well, for one thing, Egypt is very close, only a few days' journey, and it has the Nile, which gives it continuous fertility. So it's a place where famine would be very, very unusual. And here in the land of Israel, you depend upon rain, and there are variations in rainfall. There can be droughts. So instead of going, let's say, to Nebraska or to Madagascar or something, Egypt is obviously the most natural place to go if there would be a famine. I don't think there's a problem in understanding that. As occurred as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "See, now I have known that you're a man of beautiful appearance." Now, a woman of beautiful appearance. Now, you pointed out it's very awkward in English, and English is a pretty literal translation of the Hebrew. See, now I have known. And there's a variety of approaches to understanding it. One, I would say, radical approach is that he never looked at her before to see her physical beauty. They've been married for many decades. Another approach is, and that's why it would be in the past tense, that you're a beautiful woman, but it was never appropriate to speak about it because it didn't make any difference. But now it's going to make a difference. Now, Egypt is a big, fertile, and powerful country, and its culture, certainly for a place as close as Canaan was to Egypt, was well known. So Abraham is taking into account what he knows of their culture in order to plan how the visit is going to proceed. And he knows that a woman of Sarah's beauty is very rare, and they are dark-skinned, and Abraham's complexion was lighter-skinned. And now I'm going to tell you something which you can check on your own. I heard it from a very reliable source. In Black Africa, you're all sitting down? In Black Africa, black is an ugly color. Black is Beautiful was invented by left-wing white liberals who wanted to somehow show acceptance of black culture, but just inaccurate respect to black culture. They themselves had ways of whitening their skin, and they appreciated the one who was lighter skinned was considered to be more attractive. So they're coming down to an area where they are lighter skinned than the rest of the natives, and she's very beautiful in and of herself. She's going to attract attention. Now it's just the two of them, and they're strangers. How is Egypt going to react to seeing them? He says to her, and perhaps she knows this also, but he's introducing a proposal, so he's giving the background for the proposal that he sees in his mind. And look, if they see you, and we're defenseless, really, and they conclude that we are husband and wife, and the only way that they could get you is by killing me, then I'll be in danger of being killed. If we present ourselves as brother and sister, then they will naturally assume that they don't need to kill me to get you. Indeed, if the person who's applying to suit for your hand is wealthy enough and has enough status, we might even take it as a compliment and as a providence to become related to someone who's rich and has high status in Egypt. So they won't have to kill me. So their culture is structured in such a way that they're not going to simply take a married woman and use her. That's like a taboo. And on the other hand, in order to get you, they would not consider killing me to be as much as a moral or social barrier to doing that. And by the way, somebody mentioned yesterday that 200 years later, we know that they were characterized by great promiscuity. Promiscuity on the one hand, and publicly taking a man's wife away from him isn't the same thing. That's why the promiscuity is done in secret. It isn't advertised. So I don't think the fact that they were promiscuous, remember the person said, and he was quoting sources, that when the firstborn died, a lot of people died who didn't seem to be firstborn. Nobody knew they were firstborn. It seemed like they were children before, and turned out that, yeah, they were, but they were some different mother or different father, like they didn't know. That's not the same as publicly taking a man's wife. So I don't think that that's any problem to understand why Abraham was afraid of this. The fact that they're secretly promiscuous doesn't mean that they're going to publicly violate marriage. So that's his worry. Now, he says, please say that you're my sister. The assumption is he's going to say that they're brother and sister, but if she denies it, it's going to be problematic. So he's asking her to go along with his plan that they should present themselves as brother and sister. Yeah.
So there's a concern that even when they marry, the Egyptians are going to want her so bad that they'll kill him to get her.
That's right.
Take her. And the line that says that it may go well with me for your sake, Rashi seems to be saying that they'll shower them with gifts. That's the going well. They get gifts and money.
Right. So now here we have to be very careful because we, as we said, if I'm asking you for a favor and I'm giving two reasons, you would expect if there are two reasons, I would put the more important one first and the less important one second. And if these are disconnected reasons, number one, they'll give me a lot of money, and number two, I'll stay alive. The order is very peculiar. He should have said, I'll stay alive, and in addition to staying alive, they'll give me gifts. And also, sort of morally, if it were just a matter of getting gifts, would that justify the lie? Not obviously. Suppose it was found out. You come down, you say your brother and sister, say, oh, we have special tax rebates for brothers and sisters. They find out that you're lying. I think people would feel cheated, right? If it's a question of saving your life, then no one can complain that you lied. It's perfectly appropriate to lie to save your life. To lie and get some money, that's morally questionable. So I've got two problems with they'll treat me well, it'll go well for me, meaning that he'll be given monetary gifts. Number one, how is that a moral justification? And number two, why put it first? The answer that's suggested, this is my idea, I mean, it's, by the commentaries, is it's not, I want you to say we're brother and sister, so I'll get A and B, two separate things. It's that if we say that we're brother and sister, then those who want to marry you will try to bribe me in order to be able to marry you, and that's how I'll stay alive. I'll stay alive because instead of killing me to get you, they'll try to bribe me to get you. So he doesn't want the money. It's not a question of getting the money. It's a question, this is the process that will take place if we say we're brother and sister, and that's how I'll be able to survive.
The problem's not solved there.
Why not?
Because he was concerned that A, he'll be killed, and two, she'll be taken, they do bad things with her. So if they're brother and sisters, he's not killed, but they're still going to want to take her and do bad things with her, right?
They're going to want to, but it doesn't follow that they'll succeed in doing it. At least he has the opportunity of playing for time. And then either if it gets too dangerous, they can leave, or he'll find an ally, or there's some other strategy. This at least buys time.
Why does it, I don't understand how getting gifts buys time.
Because, why is he getting gifts? Because somebody wants to marry her. Now suppose there are two that want to marry her. Well, this one will give gifts, that one will give gifts, and they'll make promises, and he'll play one off against the other. It's like selling a field.
He's creating a bidding war for Sarah.
Exactly.
Why don't they just take her without giving gifts?
Who's they? This one wants and this one wants. If this one wants and this one takes, he's going to kill him. They're Egyptians competing with one another.
Either way, they're going to be taking her, then another will take her, but she's going to be taken, right?
No, because since they're brother and sister, you don't have to take her. You can offer the brother enough compensation that he'll willingly agree to it. That's the right. That would be much more normal than taking her away from her brother, right? I
I
mean,
thought they were evil.
It's also like a
no. You see, there's a difference between what a person will do when his back is to the wall and when his back isn't to the wall. Right? Will a person steal? Not usually. But if he needs it and there's no other way to get it, then he'll steal. If you give him another way to get it, you see somebody's trying to steal your car. You say, listen, you need a car? Work for me for a month, and I'll give you enough money to rent a car. A lot of people would take it. They just didn't know that they didn't have that opportunity before. Somebody's committed to stealing. Stealing's top priority. He's only a thief. He's doing this because he has no other way to manage. Yeah.
Can I say a potential idea on this that it may go well for me? It also seems like, I'm not exactly sure who was treating Avram well, how involved Paro was with, this relationship with Avram now that he's in Egypt, but it does seem like, as opposed to if Avram was known as Sarah's husband, and now initially they're just viewing this person as a hurdle to get over, but instead he's a brother, and they start engaging with him in ways where they end up giving him gifts, and that's going to lead to all sorts of dialogue and a chance to get to know this person. Later on, when it was discovered, Paro gets Saras, and he's looking at Avram, it's not Avram, this person who stole all these gifts from me, it's Avram who I've been dealing with for a while, and he's a good guy, and and he asks Avram's like, why didn't you tell me? I would have listened to you. Well, what do you mean I would have listened to you, Avram? It's like, well, I would have listened to you now knowing you, to a certain degree, but it's almost like the fact that it will go well for me is that he's going to have more time to, that's maybe Avram didn't even know at the outset how this was going, what this was going to happen. But ultimately, because the Egyptians ended up, the whole idea of like being a giver, it seemed to form a positive relationship with Avram, which kind of ultimately resulted in the real, like the final redemption where he was able to go out with Sarah. Like the way the events played out.
Well, first of all, let's get some facts on the table. This conversation takes place before they arrive in Egypt.
Right.
So it's not that they've been there for a while and people have gotten to know them and then they say they're brothers. He said, when we go enter the land, this is how we should present ourselves, number one.
Okay.
Number two, he has no clue that Pharaoh's going to get involved.
So maybe
He's
he
not-
didn't know at the outset. But
Right.
that's how it ends up
I certainly didn't know. He just knew that her appearance will attract attention, and some people will be interested in doing something. He can't predict that it's going to be Pharaoh. Don't forget, Pharaoh already has 102 wives. So, maybe he has Canaanite wives also. I mean, we don't know that he's going to be
Or
involved.
people who can advocate on his behalf.
Okay.
You know?
So, but again, nobody knows him. Nobody's going to advocate on his behalf. He's walking. He hasn't gotten there yet. He's telling her that this is what we should do. In order that they shouldn't kill me to get you, because that could be an outcome if they present themselves as husband and wife.
So he's not predicting any potential relationships he'll have a chance to form.
No, well, he's just saying I'm going to convert, like he said, going to convert the problematic of they're married and I want to get her into their brother and sister, and therefore we'll have a bidding war, which would be very natural for them. Yeah.
This is just like a quick side question, but Avram and Sarah, aren't really, they're not young people at this point in time, right? And Sarah's still beautiful at this age. How old is she even?
I think some say he was 70 or 75 when he went down, so she was 65. Now, think of it this way: he lived to the age of 175. So that means that his life is less than half over. So if you measure how he looks at that time, he can look pretty good, right? And she lived to 127, and she's 65, so she's about going through half of her life. She can be very
It
beautiful.
doesn't mean that we know it took him like 20 years to turn into a teenager or something. I'm not sure what the rate of development is.
Correct, but since you're not sure, it's hard to ask a question. Right? So the rate of development was such that she was beautiful. We certainly have people today who are that age who are very attractive.
Yeah, it's rare, but yeah.
Huh?
I said, yeah, it's rare, but sure.
Becoming less and less rare.
Yeah. And the people today aren't expecting to live to 175 or even to 127. Okay, so that's, yeah, and then, so that was the plan. And I'll live on account of you because of, yeah, right. One second, let me just check the Hebrew. I hope I'm not making a mistake here. Yeah. Anyway, that's this passage. So are we satisfied now with this passage, with the questions that came up yesterday? Okay, let's look at the second passage because it was very late when we got to it, and there are also some very interesting details there.
So we're moving past the law,
Oh, so it's an interesting question what the status of lying is. I told you that Immanuel Kant, one of his most famous mistakes, was to write that you are always required to tell the truth, no matter what. Morality requires absolute truth-telling. And I gave you the example of the guy who's being chased to kill. They want to kill him. You get a frantic knock on your door, and you open the door, and George is standing there, and he says, "Peter's coming after me with a gun. He wants to kill me." And he runs into your closet and closes the door. 20 seconds later, Peter arrives at the door with the gun out. "Where's George?" What are you supposed to do? Well, he called Kant on the phone and say, "What am I supposed to do?" "Tell him the truth." "He's in the closet." Peter says, "Thanks a lot." Bang, and he's dead. Is that the right outcome? Shouldn't you tell him, "He ran around the corner, run quickly, you'll catch him," and then call the police? Shouldn't you lie? It's certainly not correct to say that you should always tell the truth. You have a patient who's got a heart condition, and then he's just done some tests for cancer. And the cancer's pretty bad. The patient says to the doctor, "Well, doc, what were the results of the cancer test?" "Well, it's pretty bad." "Oh, my gosh." And he's gone. Probably the wrong thing to do. Probably should say, well, we need to make some follow-up tests and then consult with the family and see how to break it to him, because otherwise you're going to injure him. You don't always have to, it's not always right to tell the truth. And we have some rules about when yes and when no, and they're derived from verses in the Torah and other. Maybe we'll study them. So the idea of lying to save your life, and that's what happens with those who know about Avimelech, that's exactly what he says there. I lied to you that we're brother and sister because otherwise I'd be dead by now. And Avimelech has no answer to that. There's no complaint against that. He knows that that's true. So, but lying to get money, that seems to be very, very difficult. So therefore, if you thought going well with me is one thing and staying alive is another thing, and they're separate items, and just telling her, I want these two good outcomes, it'd be very hard to explain it that way, because lying for the sake of getting gifts is not a moral thing to do. And that's why I wanted to stress that it's lying so that they'll give him gifts so as to be able to marry her, and that's how they'll stay alive. Not just getting the gifts. It isn't the gifts that he wants. Okay, now, so the other place was on page 71. So the first thing to pay attention to is verse 1. And here, when you read carefully, one of the things you ask yourself is, okay, they told me this information, and they used these words. Are these the most obvious words to use to communicate the information? Could it have been told in some other way? Is there a reason why it was told this way rather than another way? And here, once you think that way, I think you come across a peculiarity right away. Sarai's wife, Avram's wife, had borne him no children. That's not the obvious way to say that she's barren. I don't think anybody who's worried about the barrenness would say it that way. If you ever know a couple who haven't had children for a long time, you don't say, she didn't bear any children for him. You say, she doesn't have any children. She didn't have any children. Why would you say she didn't bear him any children? So the first verse here is, right away you think, what is it talking about? Why is it saying it that way? And then it gets worse as you go on, because she portrays herself to Abraham as a woman who isn't a mother, a woman who has no children. When she talks to Abraham, she doesn't mention anything about not having borne him children. She simply says, see, Hashem has restrained me from bearing. He hasn't enabled me to have a child. Consort now with my maidservant. Perhaps I will be built up to her and then be able to have a child. It's all about herself. So why should you introduce the sequence by saying she didn't bear him any children? And I'm explaining it that that's what's going on in her mind. She thinks of her as someone who will present Avram with a child, an heir. That's what she wants to accomplish. But if she says to Avram, listen, I'm on your side, Avram. I really identify with you. I care about you. I want to give you a child who will be your heir. And it's not working out, so please take my handmaid. He'll be gigantically indebted to her. Because of her concern that he should have an heir, she's willing to invite a co-wife into the relationship. There'll be a gigantic debt that he'll owe her. The way he presents it is the other way around. She says, I want to have a child. I don't have any children. I'm asking you to do me a favor and consort with my maidservant so that I can have a child, and I owe you a debt of gratitude because you're enabling me to become a mother. She presents it in the exact opposite way. And that is where she pays back what he did for her in the previous case. And you see how that relationship works between the two of them. Yeah? Now, the question the last question we asked was, why did she think that giving Hagar to Abraham as a wife and their having a child together will have anything to do with her? Well, she can think, I am doing something good for my husband. I am providing him with another possible heir, and that merit that I have for doing that, Kodesh Baruch Hu will give me the ability to have a child of my own. She doesn't say that to him. That could be her motivation. She doesn't say that to him. And his motivation is very clear because it says, he heeded the voice of Sarai, meaning he never would have thought of this. He never would have suggested it. was the furthest thing from his mind. But she said he should do it, and she said he should do it for her. To that, he can't say no. You're asking me to do this for you? Of course I won't say no. Okay? Okay, that's all that I have to say about this passage. We're together with these passages? Now I want to show you something very, very different. Take out Sidurim. Keep the blue books, because we're going to use that also. But take out Sidurim. Thank you very much. We're on page 27.
27?
Yeah.
What's on there? Does it have a different siddur?
Oh, right after Birchos HaShachar, or right after the Akedah, if you have it, Le'olam, Yehei Adam, Yirei Shemayim, B'Seisei V'Galui. It's the paragraph, Aval Anachnu Amcha B'nei Risecha, B'nei Avraham Ohavcha. Have it? Okay. But we are your people, members of your covenant. Now, there's a lot here, and there are lots of questions that could be raised, but I want you to pay attention to the grammar. There's something here that's, if you're paying attention to the grammar, you should think, boy, that's weird. But we are your people, members of your covenant, children of Abraham, your beloved, to whom you swore at Mount Moriah, the offspring of Isaac, his only son, who was bound atop the altar, community of Jacob, your firstborn son, whom, because of the love which you loved him, etc., etc. Let's try it again. Think of what it says about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Is it the same thing? Is it consistent?
No.
Children of Abraham, your beloved, to whom you swore. Offspring of Isaac, his only son. Community of Jacob, your firstborn son. Do you see a discontinuity here? A break in a pattern?
Yeah. It's Jacob was they didn't say that we were offspring or sons of Jacob or anything. The other ones were referred to as sons of Abraham or offspring of.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I didn't notice that because I wasn't paying attention. But you're right. The first two are offspring, and the third one is community. It's not offspring. Okay. There's something else. What else? Someone else see something else?
Your beloved, his only son, firstborn son.
Well, you have to. There's three. What's the pattern and what's the break?
Abraham he refers to as your beloved.
Yes.
Isaac he refers to as Abraham's only son,
Uh-huh.
and that's not referring to God's relationship with Isaac. It's referring to Yitzchak's relationship with Avram, and then Yaakov, your firstborn son, going back to God.
Okay. Abraham is related to God. Isaac is related to Abraham. And Jacob is related to God. Isn't that a little peculiar? You understand what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? Now, I want you to know there is another text in the Siddur, which instead of saying for Isaac, his only son, says, your bound one. So it was bound on the altar, and you is God again, which would make it consistent. Your. But we don't have that what we call nusach, that text. We have you for Abraham and you for Jacob, and in the middle you have Isaac, who is related to Abraham. Well, there are no accidents here, and if the pattern is broken, there's got to be a reason for it. Okay? That's the first thing to take into account. Now, let's take a look at the blue book, and I'll show you another peculiarity.
Where's the other place in the Siddur?
I'm sorry?
Where's the other place in the Siddur you're referring to?
Other place in the Siddur? I'm going to the Chumash now. Look on page 129. Page 129, you have a case where Hashem blesses Isaac by speaking directly to him. So it's chapter 26. Verse 2. Hashem appeared to him and said, do not descend to Egypt, dwell in the land I shall indicate to you, sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your offspring I will give all these lands, and establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I will increase your offspring like the stars of the heavens, and will give to your offspring all these lands. And all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your offspring. Gigantic blessing that he's giving to Isaac direct. Because, it's not free, it's not hanging in the air. There's a reason why I'm giving this to you. Let's see what the reason is. Because Abraham obeyed my voice, observed my safeguards, my commandments, my decrees, and my Torahs. Isaac, you're getting a blessing because of what your father did. Okay, that's number one. Now look on page 133. Another blessing that God gives to Isaac. Verse 24, top of the page. Hashem appeared to him that night and said, I am the God of your father Abraham. Fear not, for I am with you. I will bless you and increase your offspring. Because, there's a reason. I'm giving you these things. Why? Because of Abraham, my servant. Those are the only two blessings that God gives to Isaac, and both of them are because of Abraham. That's remarkable. I don't know of any other blessing in the entire 1,000 pages of the Hebrew Bible which is stated in that way. I'm giving this to you because of somebody else. Somehow, Isaac's the only one who has this feature in the blessing that he's getting. I think both the Siddur and the Chumash are teaching us that somehow Isaac belongs in the trio because he's hanging on Abraham. Abraham's in the trio because he starts the trio. And Jacob's in the trio somehow on his own. But Isaac is there because he's hanging on Abraham. Now, in our philosophical perspective, this is a very, very important fundamental principle because Abraham and Isaac were real people, had real careers and real lives, and also they expressed and they represented certain principles of the way in which God sets up the world and the way God interacts with the world. And those two principles are both godly principles, but they're not equal. Abraham's principle is the principle of loving kindness, which is the source of all creation. In the Psalms, there's a verse, Olam Chesed Yiboneh, the world is created out of Chesed, which is loving kindness. Loving kindness is the original motivation and continuing motivation for the existence and continuation of the world. Isaac stands for a principle of justice, judgment, accountability, responsibility, obedience, which is also a divine principle, but it isn't equal. Everything other than loving kindness gets into the world only because it's a way of contributing to loving kindness. Contributing has many features, there are many different ways of doing it, but it's got to be based on loving kindness, otherwise it couldn't get in. The only principle that runs the world is the principle of loving kindness. Okay, now we have in the Siddur a mention of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When you look at the three of them, Abraham is loving kindness, Isaac is strict justice, strict accountability, strict judgment, and Jacob is an amalgam of the two of them in a certain way, which I will describe in Yis Hashem in a few minutes. So, I look at Abraham and I say, he expresses loving kindness. Loving kindness is the principle by which the entire creation started. It does stand on its own. It is self-justified. It is the goal of the entire exercise. Isaac comes in, and strict justice does not stand on its own. It's not self-justifying. It's only there because it contributes to Abraham's loving kindness. That's why, in the Siddur, Abraham is related to God, and Isaac's related to Abraham, because he can't be related to God if he's not related to God, to Abraham. That's why when God gives Isaac blessings, he says, I'm giving you blessings, and it's not to him, it's to him as the father of the Jewish people, but I'll give them to you because you're an extension of Abraham. You don't stand on your own. Jacob, since he has his own possession of loving kindness, he's an amalgam of the two. He can also stand on his own, especially the way in which the amalgam is made, which I'll explain to you in a minute. And that's why Isaac in the Siddur is described as Abraham's son rather than relating to Hashem. And there's another piece of information which fits into this pattern, and that is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, as some of you know, is the day of judgment. That and Yom Kippur, both of them are days of judgment. What do we read from the Torah on the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah? Maybe some of you know. What do we read on the first day of Rosh Hashanah? We read about the birth of Isaac. Birth of Isaac. And the second day we read about the binding of Isaac on the altar to be sacrificed. Now, since Rosh Hashanah are days of judgment, they're really Isaac's days. They're the days in which his principle is foremost. So what do we read about? Number one, we read about Isaac's origin. How did judgment come into the picture of the world? How did it become relevant as a divine mode of interaction with the world? You know how? He was born from Abraham. He's an offshoot of Abraham. That's how he came into existence. And the second day, you have Abraham, whose loving kindness, binding Isaac on the altar to be sacrificed. That means to say that the principle of strict justice and judgment is under the control of and sometimes can be nullified by loving kindness. So if you think of Rosh Hashanah as Isaac's day, the day in which Isaac's sort of in the forefront of the divine interaction, the readings of the Torah are really compromising to him. He doesn't stand on his own, doesn't stand out, isn't portrayed as the hero. He's portrayed as, number one, being the child of Abraham, and number two, being under Abraham's control to the extent that Abraham could completely nullify him. That's a picture of where judgment sits. That's what judgment is. It has that secondary nature to the loving kindness, which is really the foundation of the way in which the world works. So here you have what look like tiny details of Jewish sources. And in a certain sense they are, because they're very short, a few words here and there, but they carry a big payload. And when you take the Siddur on the one hand, and the Chumash on another hand, and the laws of what pieces of the Chumash you read on the days of Rosh Hashanah, which are really three very distant facts from one another, and you see that they all contribute to the same theme, you're getting a picture of how Judaism works. Judaism is a system with many dimensions of information and many dimensions of practice, but there are underlying themes that run through all of them. And when you see how the themes connect to one another, you understand that it's a very highly organized system. I learned this from the Pri Tzaddik. When I first asked my Rebbe Zatzal when I could learn Chassidus, he said, yes, learn Pri Tzaddik. Pri Tzaddik is very hard. Later I thought to myself, boy, he really had, he gave me a gift of confidence by asking him to read the Pri Tzaddik, because he quotes from all over, all different sources. You have to be somewhat familiar with all of them to be able to understand what he's talking about. And he takes, 10 or 12 or 15 things and puts them together into a pattern. But I learned that's the way to have an understanding of the way Yiddishkeit works, is to see those kinds of patterns. So here I'm giving you this example of these three that fit together to show this pattern. We together so far? Yeah. Well, no?
I was saying like Dovid,
Oh, yeah.
Just curious, in Ubolet Sion, whenever we say the same idea is going on over there, where we say Titan Emes Le'Yaakov Chesed L'Avram, I've always wondered like why Yitzchak isn't in there. It's an interesting problem, and in a way you see that you have background for it. You have Jacob is Emes and Abraham is Chesed. That's definitely true, and the two of them sort of are the brackets of the whole system. And Isaac is a lesser bracket. He's a lesser bracket. There's no question about it. No question about it. So now, let's talk for a moment about Jacob. I worked on this for a long time, totally unsuccessfully. How do you amalgamate these two principles of loving kindness on the one hand and strict justice on the other in a single entity, single life like Jacob? I thought maybe they alternate, or maybe you compromise between them, and then I tried analogies from math and from physics and from chemistry, and nothing worked. Finally talked about this with my oldest son. He said, Abba, the reason why it's not working is because it's a Jewish idea, and you're using non-Jewish sources to explain the Jewish idea. That's why it doesn't work. So that's pretty reasonable. So I said, well, what idea should I use? He said, use or and kli. Oh, well, first I have to find out what or and kli were and work on them. And then it works out like this. You have two principles. Sometimes the situation you're facing is one where what's motivating you to act is one principle, but you can't show that. You can't make that obvious, because if you do, you're going to fail with what you want to do. So you clothe your action in a different principle, and that's what you show, that's what you publicize, so as to achieve the goal of the inner principle. When you will be parents, Mitzvah Hashem, you'll do this often. When you want to communicate something to a child that's of great importance, and you want to take it seriously, sometimes you will use fear. I don't know what your prejudices are in psychology, but if you're against that in principle, grow out of it. For example, you have your 5-year-old and his ball is rolling into the street and he's running to chase it, and you see that this is a habit of his. So you don't say, come, let's talk about this. The ball and the cars are coming and so on. You don't do that. You want next time that he shouldn't do it. So you grab him by the back of his jacket and you pull him out of the street roughly, and you say, don't ever do that. You want him to be afraid so he won't get killed the next time his ball goes into the street. I think that's a worthy goal. And probably if you try to reason with a 5-year-old, you won't get very far. Now, what's motivating me? That I want him to be afraid of me? What's motivating me? That I want him to be scared? No, I want him to be alive. What's motivating me is that I love him too much to take a chance on this. If I show my love and care for him, if I don't make it frightening for him, he might get killed. So I can't show him where I'm coming from. When he's 8 or when he's 10, I could be able to explain to him why it was done that way and explain to him where it was coming from. But at the time, you have to hide it. Similar to what we said yesterday, what we said yesterday about doing a favor for someone in such a way that he won't owe you anything,
by not showing him you're doing a favor for him. Are you hiding something for him? Yes, you are. But you're hiding it from him because it'll be better for him if you hide it. You pretend that he's doing you a favor. That's the guise, that's the clothing in which you put the action. Whereas what's motivating you to do it is that you're doing him a favor. But you don't show that to him. If you showed him that you're doing him a favor, it wouldn't have the effect of building up his self-esteem. It only builds up his self-esteem because he thinks he's doing you a favor. So that's the way you clothe it. So very often in life, you have this necessity of you're motivated by A, but in order to achieve what A would motivate you to do, you clothe what you do in principle B. HaKadosh Baruch Hu acts that way with respect to the world also. Ramchal has a whole philosophy. Based on that, there's justice, and then there's Gilui HaYichud, revealing the unity in the world. Revealing the unity is the motivation, but the mode of interaction is justice. So this, he said to me, is Jacob. How does Jacob combine loving kindness and justice? His motivation is loving kindness, and the way he portrays it is justice, which is very close to what the Ramchal says Kadosh Baruch Hu is doing all the time. So it's not half and half. It's not compromise. It's not, Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, loving kindness, and Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, justice, and Shabbos, you take a rest. That isn't the right model. The right model is the ultimate goal is always loving kindness, and often what's used to achieve the loving kindness is a veneer of justice. That's how he puts the two of them together. Well, when you hear that, you understand that for Jacob also, loving kindness is fundamental. It's really fundamental. It's just that he sometimes uses the veneer of justice to achieve it. That gives him the ability to stand on his own in this trio, whereas Isaac doesn't have that because he's wholly strict justice, or almost wholly, and that being the case, he has to be portrayed as and identified as coming from Abraham and leaning on Abraham. Without that, he has no place in the trio. That's what's going on, at least on the surface, in these passage questions. Yeah.
So, how does that work with the idea that Hashem initially wanted to run the world through din?
Oh, this is a very important question. I can start to answer it now, but maybe we'll go do it in more depth tomorrow. If you look in the book of Genesis, you'll see the first chapter plus the first 3 verses of the second chapter. The name of God is Elokim, only Elokim. And that name connotes basically the idea of strict justice. From then on, it's a double name. Hashem Elokim, the 4-letter name, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, together with the name Elokim, it's a double name. And that name, the Yud and the Hey, the Vav and the Hey, that name connotes mercy, which I think is loving kindness, but that's another story that I can't go into right now. So the commentators explain, really he created the world with the combination, the basis of which was loving kindness. But the Medrash says he wanted to create the world with strict justice as its only principle. Now, given what I've told you, and if you follow out that Medrash carefully, the explanation has to be, by creating the world with strict justice as its only principle of being, that will be the way in which he could do the maximum loving kindness. That's how the maximum loving kindness will come into existence. And the symbol of it is this. There's a big mitzvah of charity. Maimonides distinguishes 8 different levels of charity. The top level of charity is where you give someone a job. Not money, give him a job. Why? Because when you give him money, he knows that he's a failure. He didn't earn that money. It had to be given to him for nothing. When you have a job, at the end of the week he has money, but he earned it. He feels that he's competent. He feels that he's successful. So not only do you give him money, but you're giving him his self-esteem, you're giving him his self-respect, his dignity. It's a double gift. Now, ask yourself, when you hire somebody for a job, sign a contract, comes the end of the week, and he says, I work 40 hours, according to the contract, I'm supposed to get $2,000. You hand him $2,000. What kind of relationship is that? He's got his contract, he's worked, and you owe him the money. You're required to pay him the money. What kind of a relationship is that? That's justice. If you don't pay him the money, you're cheating him. You're not doing any charity to him at the end of the week. The charity is in setting up the justice relationship. Because by setting up the justice relationship, you give him the best possible gift. So the motivation is to give the gift. You didn't owe him a job at the beginning of the week. But once you give him a job, you set up a justice relationship, and that justice relationship is the best possible gift. That was the idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to create the world with strict justice, just like giving you a job so that you earn it and you feel that you deserve it. What he saw is that requirement is too strict for many people to succeed, and therefore he modified it to have some loving kindness in the picture as well. But that it only gets in because it is an expression of loving kindness. And one proof of this, I will review this tomorrow because I'm doing a lot now, but one proof is this. It says, he saw that the world wouldn't stand with strict justice, so he added, I'm calling it loving kindness, I'll explain that tomorrow also. What do you mean he's added? If justice is the principle and the world can't stand with justice, then quit the project. Just don't make a world. Where's the motivation for making the world come from when justice fails? It has to be that justice isn't the top concern. There has to be something else that's the top concern, and justice serving that top concern. And when the world's going to fail with strict justice, the top concern then isn't satisfied. So the top concern intervenes and says, no, we won't do it that way. If justice were really at the top commitment, then of course Baruch Hu should say, I'll spend outside of time without a world, and that's the way in which my existence will be. And that isn't what happened. Anyway, that's a basic piece of Jewish philosophy. I'll do it again tomorrow, so we'll get more depth and detail into it, and hopefully that'll be good to answer.